Hi everybody, and welcome to week 13. There is a lot of information on this assignment page and it may look intimidating, but I want to assure you that there really are only a couple basic tasks this week. One is to evaluate the sources that you found last week. Another is to complete your speech, and another is simply to post it to the discussion board. The reason there's so much information here is because there's very specific instructions for each one of those things. But the focus of the week is to complete the research and write the draft of your speech. So let's take a look at what's going on in week 13. So the first assignment here is to review your speech instructions. And you have seen these before, so here's the instructions for the speech assignment. Here is an example speech. Highly encourage you to read that. Read the example right here. And then here's the rubric. This is how you're getting graded. So take a look at those three documents. And then another thing that I think is really important is that you watch this video on how to use Monroe's motivated sequence. And here are a few notes that may seem kind of repetitious from the instructions, but I put them here just to highlight certain things so you can do an effective speech and get maximum points for it. There's also another lecture here and this speech or this lecture is on ethos, pathos, and logos. As you engage in any kind of persuasive task, you want to use those three elements, and I think this video does a good job of explaining those things. Then 13B is to read instructions for the source evaluation assignment. And this is going to be a one-page assignment in which you simply write down your sources and explain why you think they're credible and reliable. Because one of the elements of good persuasion, of course, is that you're starting with sources that are reliable. So see the research instructions in week 12. Find at least 3 reliable sources to support your speech. Library databases are highly recommended. And as I also highly recommend that you consult with a librarian. And you need to find 3 sources, and your sources might be used to show that there's a need for what you're talking about. Your sources might be used to show the benefits of doing what you are talking about, both for yourself and for others. Then evaluate the credibility of your sources and submit your evaluation. Now, what does this mean? Sources, as you know, can be crap. We certainly see crap all the time on the web, perhaps on cable TV, where things are so skewed that we don't know if a person is telling the truth or not. We see crap all the time in marketing and advertising, of course, because claims are often exaggerated to sell products. So in a speech, though, you want to be reliable. You want to be perceived as reliable, as giving audience truthful information, and that's what we mean by credibility. Now, here's a document that explains credibility, and there are a few elements of that. First of all, what are the qualifications of the author? What are the qualifications of the publisher? What's the publisher's reputation? If you're citing scientific data, how old is it? That might matter. And is what you're finding comparable? Does it seem to make sense with other sources that you have looked at? Or does it seem kind of really off the wall? So those are things to look at when you evaluate source credibility. This document explains that. Your assignment here is to, first of all, cite the source using MLA citation, and there's some help for that right underneath here. Then just provide a brief description of your source. Where did you get it? What is it? And then add 3 to 5 sentences. This is not a lot, just 3 to 5 sentences explaining why you think it's a credible source and why it's going to work for you in your speech. And your assignment's going to look just like this. I'm going to click on this and open this. This particular sheet has 5 sources. You only need 3. So you're going to do this 3 times. This is the source. This is where I got it. This is why I think it's good. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, now let's get back to Blackboard here. And remember that if you use databases, one of the great advantages of using a database is that the database will provide the citation for you. So then you don't have to worry about looking up how to cite things. But if you need to look up how to cite something, and that's not a big deal, there is a document here that has the most common sources, and just copy the format from there. All right, let's assume that you've found your 3 sources, you have evaluated them, you have this document that you've typed up. Just submit it right here. And that is part of the assignment for Wednesday. And then you've got one more assignment for Wednesday, and that is to review Monroe's motivated sequence. And what is here is kind of a repetition of what was explained up here, but I put it here again because I think it's worth reviewing again. So review Monroe's motivated sequence. And then here is a speech that uses the motivated sequence on YouTube. I'd recommend you watch that. And then here is a repetition of that citation for ethos, pathos, and logos. Now, all along, I'm assuming that you're working on your speech. So even though those are the only assignments due Wednesday, I assume you're still working on your speech. Then, for the second half of the week, read about introducing those sources in your speech. You found the sources for a reason. You want to include them in your speech. How do you write them into your speech? Well, here's some suggestions. You use phrases like according to, or Dr. Bruce Perry is a national expert on child abuse, and his research says this. So in your speech, name the source, then relate the information to what it is that you're trying to prove. And if the audience is not going to recognize the authority of your source, then explain who it is. For example, it wouldn't be sufficient to simply say Dr. Bruce Perry says this about the brain. We don't know if Dr. Bruce Perry is a physician or if Dr. Bruce Perry is maybe a professor of art history. So make sure that you are explaining the credibility of your source. Now, if you were simply using a source like the Mayo Clinic, you probably don't need to explain credibility because your audience is going to know that. And then as you include the information in your speech, remember that you can include information either by paraphrasing, that's restating the ideas in your own words, and in which case you still want to cite the source and you want to change the words significantly, and that's paraphrase. Or you can quote a source, and if you're going to do that, remember that this is a speech. You need to have words that tell the audience you're quoting. You can't simply put a parenthesis after your quote like you might be able to in a research paper. Then write your speech. So you know how to put the sources in, you've got a good idea of what you want to do. So here is a template for writing your speech. And here is another example of a written Monroe's motivated sequence speech. So do look at those documents and they'll help you immensely. After you've written your speech, post it to the discussion board because your peers are going to be commenting on it. And you will post this by Saturday of week 14. Comments on 2 other speeches are due by, or I'm sorry, you're going to post this by Saturday of week 13. That's this week. And then comments on 2 other speeches will be due by Wednesday of week 14. So what do you say about these other speeches? Here is a document that's got a few questions that you should answer. Basically, what you're going to do is you're going to read each other's speeches and comment on how persuasive they are and what they still might need in order to convince you to take this challenge that your classmates want you to take. And then finally, highly recommended, seek additional feedback on your speech. The ultimate test of a persuasive message is, did it work? Persuasion is much harder than just providing information. And if you're going to go to all this trouble to persuade people to do something, run it by a few people first and see if you have a compelling case. And I'd recommend that not only for this speech, but also in the workplace. And ask your friends, ask your family, did you get enough information to be convinced? Will you take my challenge? Well, if not, why? What are your objections? I also recommend that you submit it to the Online Writing Center or take it to the Learning Commons on the La Crosse campus if you're on the La Crosse campus. And to do that, or to submit to the Online Writing Center, the contact information is right here on the Contact tab. And this is fabulous free service Western offers. Communication tutors will look at your speech. They will look at the instructions, so please include the instructions as well, and they will give you feedback usually within 3 days. So get it to them just as soon as you can. And that is the list of assignments for the week. So in week 14, you're going to finish the speech, and then you'll give it, or you'll deliver it by the end of week 14, that Saturday. You can record it, and then you'll be almost done with the class.